live here. Still getting it set up a little bit. Alright, so cool. Alright. Alright, I think we got a pretty good view, everyone. So, alright, so what I'll be doing this morning is a demo for one of my colleagues. She's teaching a comic class. And so we're going to take advantage of technology, even though it took me forever to set this up. It would have been faster just doing it yesterday on the spot, but it's all good, right? So, so anyone who's teaching comics and it's their first time teaching, this is kind of like a crash course on how the steps you go through in the process. Usually I start out by having the students make a mini comic, which is one piece of paper and you fold it up. You can draw 6 panels, cover and a back cover. And then I have them make a story out of that. The reason I do that is because what that does, it kind of frees them up and it loosens them up so they have the ability to, think uninhibitedly, because when you tell somebody to make a comic, it's a lot of task management, so they can get overwhelmed really quick. So I do a mini first, and then we take that mini and turn that into the comic. So that's usually a surefire way of, making comics. And plus it gives them a bottom-up theory process, so they learn to go through the process. So it's a really solid foundation. So I won't be making a mini on this video. What I'm going to do is show you how to make a comic book page and show you why comic book pages are made the way they are. So it's not some alien process, something that's just confusing and ridiculous. So anyway, so what you're going to get typically, artist-wise, you're going to get artists who come into your class and they're going to say they like comics, and they'll have on a Deadpool t-shirt or they'll have on cat headphones. And that is the furthest thing from comics. So what I mean by that is that you're dealing with somebody whose perception of comics is based off of everything but comics. So they like superhero movies or they like nerd culture, right? They're not into making comics. And so they learn really quickly if they actually like them or not. So the first thing I do is make the mini. Then when we go into this next step, so what I have here is just regular drawing paper. And I do a thing called a thumbnail. Now with your thumbnail, it's where you map out your story. And so typically you draw, let's say we're going to make a 4-page comic. I literally draw 4 rectangles that represent 4 pages. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what I do is I probably shouldn't have attached the armature to the table because it's going to shake. So sorry for anyone who gets motion sickness. So anyway, so typically you do your thumbnails. So let's say we're going to do a story about a superhero's first day of school, right? So first panel is going to be an introduction. So let's say we have the superhero sleeping in their bed, right? And this is going to be a top view. Panel 2, we see an alarm clock. Let's put 8 a.m. on it. And then next panel, superhero wakes up with like bloodshot eyes, right? And it says, so next page 2, you see the superhero. Traditionally, you would see the kid jumping out the door, but this is what tells us that the kid is a superhero. We'll have his window at the top on the roof, right? We'll put the sun there, and we'll have the kid swooping out the window. And they're flying off. So this tells us that the kid is late to school and they are a superhero because they're flying, right? So you can see how simple I'm keeping this, and this is the way your thumbnail should be. This simple, nothing complicated. Next panel, we'll have our superhero land, you know, in a ridiculous superhero flume. Right? And then with the ground shaking or something, right? Next, anticipation, and then impact. Now this would be perceived as an impact because it's seen as an action, but our anticipation is actually him landing, and then our action is going to be everyone turning around and looking at him. So, and then actually, so this is a good example of why you do thumbnails first. So let's say he lands, reaction, then we want to see his action. So I'm going to insert a panel here at the end. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 panels. So in my final version, I'll reduce that. Well, I'll scoot this third panel over and make room for the fourth. And then here, we'll have him saying sorry, right? And feeling embarrassed. And you can even write embarrassed. So this is how you set up your storyboard, or your storyboard or your thumbnails. Okay, so let's take this concept here and let's actually do page 2 as if we're doing our complete pages. So let's say we laid out our entire thumbnails and you approve this artist or the student's thumbnails for their comic. Now we're going to make our final page, right? So like I said, the thumbnail should be super simple, super clean, directly to the point. and they should be doing a writing and drawing at the same time. So what will happen, a lot of times people are used to this format when working in comics, like you have a script and then um, you write your script first and then you draw it. And this is like my own personal belief is that when you do that, that's a very like sterile process of comic making, of cartoon, because I find that to be very um, reserved. It doesn't really have the magic, you know, and you see that in a lot of media today. So it's not, it is a standard, like that's the process that the big two use. But what makes a comic book unique and an advantage that the first time artist or the underdog or the indie artist has is that they don't have to follow that rule. Some people work better in those boundaries. So, you know, and schools teach that way. So it's not because they're teaching their creators to get jobs, you know. So they usually work off script just so that they can train and learn to, you know, make the correct decisions when making comics, right? And being able to follow script and tell a story is key. So, but after doing comics long enough, you can kind of create that rhythm I just showed you. So I can do a comic in like 2 days, you know, like a 24-page comic, just because it's literally, I've tapped into the process of creating a rhythm of the comic. And so I'm going to show you an example of that rhythm. So the greatest comic book creator, one of the greats, is this guy named Jack Kirby. So he does really great rhythm in his books, okay? So what you'll see, hopefully this has it. Typically what Jack Kirby does, he'll work with, he won't typically go past 6 panels on a page. Now you'll see it occasionally. You'll see it in every book. You'll see him do like an 8 panel. But I think that has a lot to do with like story at that point. See if we can get this one shot. Okay, so first page, boom, splash page. Like I said, introduction of characters, location. You're dropped right into the fight. Now it's a double splash page, and as you can see, he's collaging here. So there's no restrictions on making comics. There's no such set tool set. Everything's available. You can paint them. You can use collage. You can go all the way collage. You don't even have to like actually draw anything. Another splash page. Another splash page. All right, here we go. So he had a lot of splash pages there. So here we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 panels there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another 4 panel splash. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5. So you can see, and then here it's 6, right? So you can see he's got 6 there. So as you go through the book, you'll see that he's not really, because what happens is that when kids first start cartooning, they'll cram a page with panels because they think that putting more panels on there, they're just focused on telling the story. And the idea is to let the story breathe, to create a rhythm. So let's find an example of where Jack Kirby creates a really good rhythm. Because he'll literally, and I should have had this set up before I ran the video, but you know, that's how it works sometimes. See if he does it here, double splash page. So you'll see he does this repeat thing, right? And you can set your own language. So you have splash page, double splash page, 4 panels, splash page, 4 panels, 5 panels. So he does that thing where he will do a splash page, double splash page, another splash page, title page, and then he goes into storytelling. You'll see that a lot, but here's a good example of his count up. So Here he has four, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels, 5 panels, 6 panels, then back to 1. And then he repeats that process. And there's comics where Jack Kirby will go from splash page, 2 panels, 3 panels, 4 panels, 5 panels, 6 panels. So he's literally using the same process for his comics, a rhythm. And once you lock into that rhythm, like I said, it doesn't really matter what it is. Just set the restrictions early on for the panels. So if you set, I always set the restrictions to 6 panels at most, at least 2. Here's a different example. Here's a painted comic. It's beautiful. So as you can see here, once again, there's 4 panels there, 3 here. Let's make sure it's in focus. 5 panels there, and so on and so on. He's not here. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here he has 8 panels, but look at the way he created his clusters. These 4 little ones down there are still balanced to the 3 up here, with this middle panel that has a very like pastel tone to it versus these darker panels, right? So think of it like that. Keep it very simple, very clean. Now let's go. All right, so sorry for that little sidetrack, but it's all important. All right, so yes, I'm using a magenta marker, but let's say this is a pencil. Okay, this marker represents a pencil. So you want the sketch pad to correspond to the size of the Bristol board because you're going to use a light box. So this pad that I'm using is 11 by 17. So you would buy Bristol board that's 11 by 17. Now when you create your panels, so remember our first panel of the kid flying out the window on page 2. So, you know, page 2. And then we had the kid, what did we do? Fly off, land at school, people's reaction, and then him saying sorry. But I kind of want to show that he's going to school. So what we'll do is inject another panel. So now there's going to be 4 panels down here. 2, 3, 4. Because what I want to show now, because I felt that the rhythm was a little off. So, because I have him leaving the house. And like I said, imagine this is in pencil. And so what you want to do is inform the reader that he's flying out the window, that he's like on a 2nd floor. So you reinforce that by communicating information that represents that. So that would be birds, right, on a roof. And these are the kind of signifiers that you want to create so that the reader knows. We'll put a tree in there. Because what you want to make sure is that you're communicating to the reader the story. No one cares about how well you can draw. Okay? So any of the artists who want to show off how well they can draw, it doesn't matter. Because if they can't tell a good story, then they're wasting their time. Okay. So now let's draw our character, right? Let's make it, originally I had a boy. I was thinking of it as a boy. Let's make it a girl. Okay. And this is at this point is when the artist will make the drawings really not super detailed, but enough to where it's like the compositions are strong and that it looks good, right? We'll give her a face of of like unsure because she wants to make it to school on time. We'll give her her backpack. That's a signifier that says school, right? Now, we know she's running late. We have a tree. Now let's draw a fence down here. Make it kind of like a suburban kid, right? Some grass down there. And then up here in the distance, we can draw clouds. So make sure they establish their backgrounds. And then I kind of screwed up there. Let's do some mountains here because the perspective's way off now. I have a fence here and the sky there. So, but you get the idea, okay? So now we created our first panel. So let's go ahead and move down. And like I said, the next panel, like I said, I didn't feel comfortable after looking at the thumbnail. I was like, man, you know what? Like, I just have her landing at some random place. So what I'll do now is I'm going to have a reverse shot of her flying down, looking down at school, and I'll even do an exclamation point. And what I'll put down here is our first shot of the school. And what this tells the readers is like where she's going. Even if they can't really tell, they know that she has a destination. And we can put down here, ring, ring, showing the idea that school's in session. You can put a narration up here, you know, 8:05, superhero high. So you can see the writing, I'm kind of like incorporating the writing and the storytelling. It's all synonymous. It all goes together. So you can even do your narration here saying, Bella running late as usual. So that, you know, you can do it that way. Or you can have her mom, let's say you didn't want to do the narration, you can have her mom down here in the yard yelling up at her, saying something like, set your alarm for 7 a.m. You know, and that's going to change. But this is the phase when they're doing their page where they come up with the writing and the correct imagery and they reference, you know, find references. So if you want to draw the kid going out of a window at a suburban home, we kind of got that idea. Then you want to look that picture up, you know, and reference it. It doesn't have to be identical, but you want to reference it so that it's consistent, because the only way that when you make comics that you're going to make your world believable is having things that resonate with reality. So something that's grounded. So that's why backgrounds are important. If they're not doing backgrounds in their comics, then make them do it over because they need to have backgrounds. They'll try to draw floating characters because they have the story in their head, but you have to communicate that story. Because if you make the comic poorly, then what happens is that you're wasting your time because your audience can't read the comic. So that's why lettering is important, doing it the correct way. Because why make a comic if they can't read it? That's just like literally asinine. That's just pointless. So that's why it's important to do all this in the early stages. And you can erase, redraw these pages as much as you want. You can cut a panel out, glue it to a new page, and you know, keep the other ones. Play with it until you get it right, because once you get to the light box, that's the easy part. Okay, so we have our character going flying down to the schoolyard. We'll put like a basketball court down here. So next panel, she lands. One of those like funny superhero landing things, landing poses. The ground shakes. Shake. Boom. Right? We'll have like a couple of kids flying in the air. I like to make comics funny, even if they're not like comedies, because we have some debris flying up, some motion lines. We have one kid here getting scared. And then we'll put some clouds back here for scaling, so they can see. Now originally, what I did, I did that panel insert for, where's that? So let's go back to this. I did the panel insert where it was the characters reacting to her like, what the heck? And then her saying sorry. Right? So here I can actually put her back in the panel and her looking like embarrassed. With crowds of people. All looking at her. And I'll just do one big question mark representing all their responses. And we can have one of them say, let's say her name's Amanda. Or we'll just say, dude, really? I think that works better. And you can say, so over dramatic. That works well. And then last panel. You say, sorry, guys, I was running late. And then after we do this, so like I said, this is our pencil page. Then what we would do after this, we would get our Bristol board. So I'll just get a sheet of paper. Okay. Now you can see I did my boxes freehand. So this is when you would get the rulers and you would get the straight edges, all your tools. Now for what I use in a classroom for inking is very domestic tools. I like using tools that they can buy at like Walgreens or somewhere like that. Because if you get, let's say you get kids like ink wells and nibs, like where are they going to go buy that at? They can't buy that. So you want to give them resources that they have access to, things that are familiar. And you'll be surprised the people in the industry still use this stuff. So, meaning like this kind of stuff. So you can buy these extra fine point Sharpies, um, the fine point Sharpies. And this is I actually don't really like the super Sharpies, just because there's not much between this and this. But I do like the chisel tip. This is really good for doing your borders, your panels. And then you can sometimes find these at the grocery store or at CVS or Walgreens, and it's a brush tip Sharpie. These are really cool to get cool effects. And then whiteout pens. So you'll need these. The kids are going to bust these up. They don't know how to use them, so you have to train them how to use these and how to clean them, because if not, they're going to be dried and caked up and no good and broken by the end of your first week. So I'd teach them how to use these. Okay. And that's basically what you need. Then we go into, we tape it together. So you rip out your thumb. I mean, not your thumb, your sketch paper. I'm gonna go ahead and move this out the way. So here's our drawing on drawing paper. Now let's say this is Bristol board, even though we know it's another piece of paper. So I'll write Bristol board. Okay. So now what you're going to do with your straight edge and your and your markers, and so the whiteout's designed to correct your mistakes, because a lot of people will say like, oh, they'll go in pencil on the light box because they don't want to mess up. But that's why you have the whiteout, so that they can erase with it. And honestly, when they're light boxing, they're not really going to mess up like that. Okay? You don't really have to worry about that, because they're just tracing. So as long as they're taking their time and paying attention, then they'll be fine. Now we're going to use our markers. So this is the ink process. Okay? And it's funny because I think this whiteout pen right here was actually destroyed by a student. So as you can see where I did that mark there, then I just cancel it out, take it out with the whiteout pen. Okay. And then all you do, I usually, start out with the mid tier. So that would be your fine point. And I'm not going to ink the entire thing because that would be boring. But you just go in. And this is where you start adding your details, right? And your shadows. Okay. And this is the beauty of, where'd my brush marker go? Yeah, here it is. And this is the great thing about these brush markers, is that you can go ahead and they're really quick, really effective for shadowing. Okay. Then you're extra fine if you want can do your details, right? However you prefer to do your details. So you can see from my original drawing, my house is just like that, and you can see the details that I put in the roof. And that's literally based upon the fact that I am inking. So that's why you don't want to waste your time detailing your sketch page, because you're going to put all your detail in your final page. So why do the same step twice? Now, once the kids understand this step and this process, they can turn out pages really fast, because they're not getting tunnel vision and focusing on one part of the drawing. Because what's happening is that they have laid out the entire thing. So they're seeing the entire picture now, versus if they just start drawing and they don't light box, they just start going directly onto the Bristol board and penciling, they're gonna like overdraw that first panel, because they want to make sure it's perfect. And you don't want to do that, because you want to have a balance of the entire page first. So it's kind of like when you're making something. Let's say you're making a cake. You want to have all the ingredients first before you start baking the cake. Let's say you start baking the cake and you don't have all the ingredients, like you don't check. Then you have to leave in the middle of baking to get, let's say, if you don't have any eggs or you don't have enough eggs. Then you have to leave, go get the rest of the eggs at the grocery store, come back and continue. And by that time, let's say that, you know, the cake batter has risen, or the bread, obviously, because I don't think you have to let cake batter sit. But you get my point. So it's like you want to make sure you have all your ingredients before you start making your cake. So that's why it's important to have everything laid out. And you even want the writing to be finalized in this phase too. But like I said, you're working in pencil, so you can erase, you know, the dialogue. You could talk about the dialogue. You could write the dialogue down here, and then add in your final version of it when you're inking. That's fine too. Just make your word bubbles. So let's continue inking. And I'm not even going to ink this entire panel, just because I don't feel like drawing and inking. I mean, you know, drawing an entire panel as a demo, because that's pretty boring for the viewers. So as you can see there, I felt that I misdrew my line, so I drew a second line, and then I take my chisel and I just follow that, lock it in. And let's say I want to do my shingles again for the house. Then the beams for the house shadow. So these are the beams for the porch underneath. And so this looks a little cattywampus right here. So I'm going to add one of those parts that jet out. And then more shingles. And don't expect the kids to like understand this level of, to have this level of confidence when drawing. Like you're probably like, oh wow, that's easy. Like to think this way, to like make the house, to like communicate that's a house, isn't this easy, trust me. I just been doing this for way too long. So at this point, I'm going to do my shadows, right? And the part with inking, this is the easy part. So a lot of times when people are inking, they like watch movies, um, listen to podcasts, listen to music, converse, you know, all those kind of things. That's the time to do it. So when they're setting up their pencils, I would have them like reduce the noise so that you can like make sure you get everything right. Okay, so there's our house. And I forget what this stuff is called, you know, the stuff that's on the side of the houses. Okay, so we drew our house. I still even feel that this area down here is a little empty. So I'm gonna do some shadows here to just kind of block it out. Okay. So this kind of gives it a nice balance. So now we have our house, which I think actually looks pretty freaking sweet. I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow underneath the house, the whatever that stuff is. I'm sure everyone will correct me on. Okay, so there's our house. Okay, now let's switch over to coloring. So I used the equivalent of Copics, but they're just cheaper because Copic markers, kids are Copic heads these days. They want Copics so bad. That's all they want to use. They're too expensive. They're like $5 to $8 per marker. That blows your entire budget, and the kids are gonna run through them because they'll draw on the table with them, they'll draw on their skin with them because they just like the idea that they have it. It's kind of like a shiny toy, and so it will drive you up the wall. So if you go on Amazon and get the fake ones, these are Touch 5. Then I have another brand, Soul Color. You can get these on Amazon if you look them up. You get a set of like 80 for like $40. They're alcohol based, they blend well. So I use these and it doesn't break the budget. Ends up being like 50 cents a marker. This will get you through a couple of seasons of, you know, teaching comics. And then they can do whatever they want with them, you know, and that's going through wear and tear. All right, so what you'll do, you want the artist to have a testing sheet. So you have them use an extra piece of paper, and they can just use their sketch, and that's what they're going to test their colors out on. So I'm looking for so I'm looking for our house color. I like this color right here. The number on it is 97. So I'm going to write 97 because the bag is full, like, you know, 80 markers. Finding that marker every time, it's going to be a pain in the butt. So I just literally write it down. Now I want a shadow color. If that's going to be my house color, let's see here. Yeah, I'll use this. That'll be fun. And this is 144. 144. Okay. So let's test and see how these react. There's my blue. And there's that. So you can see they react. It actually reacts pretty well when you lay them down. So, sorry, I'm yawning. So I'm going to do my shadows first. So I'm going to go with the blue. I usually keep it pretty loose. Shadow layer. And you'd probably be surprised. Actually, I color this way. You might be thinking I'm speeding, but I sincerely color this fast typically, because I wanted to read like a comic in the sense that it has like a hand, something authentic to it. So what you can see happen, you probably can't see it on camera, but what happened is that the highlights, I mean the shadows I did with the blue are coming through, which is good because you do your shadow layers first and then you can go back in. You can go back in on them and color them again if you want to. Right? Now let's say that I'm so sorry about the shaky camera. It's probably so annoying. So I kind of like that effect I have going on there. So I'm gonna like get another color. So I'm just gonna use the complementary to blue, which is orange. I'm gonna find maybe something a little subtle to use. Opposed to something like a heavy orange color. Okay, so let's see. For the sake of time, I'll just use this one. Okay. So that works as the highlight. So what that can be is the sun coming up, right? So there we go. So there's our panel. And you just continue. It's that simple. Now, like I said, it's not going to be that easy. I make it look very easy. But as long as they're using reference and building up their shadows and lights and using the correct, not per se the correct color, but making it look professional that way. So that's, I'll go ahead and end it here. That's the first lesson for making comics with students. And I'll come back later and show you the second video. And that will be do's and don'ts.